So I'm online looking for a good movie to watch. So I scroll IMDb's 2017 movie list. I spot a film called Life, and me being a sucker for sci-fi films, decides to go and look for it. Once I find it, I bookmark the page, and a few days later, as I scroll down my list of bookmarked films, I click on it and begin to watch. And it didn't take too long before I completely regretted the decision. Now I'm not very scared by horror films. Sometimes when I watch them, I have a hard time staying awake, but this film, by the end of it, I wasn't scared. I was enraged. Let me start from the beginning. Warning, this will be packed full of spoilers. I'm going to basically give away the entire plot here on out. So if you want to see this film and you don't want it spoiled for you, please leave now or watch the movie and then come back. So we begin the film proper with some footage of outer space. It's very beautiful and very calm and peaceful. A satellite or something along those lines is moving slowly through space. Then it runs into some space junk and gets hit, thus causing the craft some damage. After this, we cut to a space station. I do not remember the name of the station, but it's not that important anyway, and I think they only named it a few times. This station has been tasked with catching the probe we saw a scene earlier. They'll have to send somebody out to spacewalk and catch it because the space debris it ran into knocked it slightly off course. Here we meet the crew. They go by the names of Roy, Kat, Hugh, Miranda, David, and Sho. I have no real invested image in any of these characters, so I refer to them off and on by the names Dead Meat 1, 2, 3, 4, and Final Girl and Final Guy. Anyway, the one named Roy, or Dead Meat number 1, is tasked with catching the probe. They need to catch this thing because it's got important soil samples from Mars they will be looking at to see if there is any life on it. Dead Meat 1 is established as a Joker character, and that's about all we learn about him, besides him being a plumber or something, and him not liking to fix showers. Anyway, he gets sent out to catch the probe, and after some built-up suspense, he succeeds. But not that it wouldn't have happened, since if he didn't, the film would be over, but would have ended at that moment. So they get the samples and bring them inside. Here the resident scientists are on board, and also stabbed a few scenes later to be crippled, and thus sealing his doom, begins to go through the samples. They do in fact find some kind of organism inside, a single-celled creature, but it's frozen and basically dead. So he changes the climate inside the sample box and manages to wake it up. After success, they contact Earth. Some little kids ask questions, and here we learn David has been in space for nearly 2 years because, as we learn a few scenes later, he doesn't like stuff going on the planet, all the wars and stuff. During this cute little Q&A, the sample is given a name. It's called Calvin, after the school of the little girl who was chosen. And having been given a name, Hugh begins to get more attached to it, so much the others joke about him being a dad. Well, here's where we learn Sho actually has become a father, because he Skypes his wife, Me, while she is giving birth to their daughter. This is about all we learn about Sho. He's got a family waiting for him in Japan, and he's Japanese. He seems to be the only married person in the film, which we all know makes him his chances of living next to zero. So Hugh continues to look at the samples, which have grown bigger, and he makes some interesting discoveries about it, such as it being basically all muscle, and comparing it to stem cells. And he makes contact, as in the being begins to bond with him on some level, as it hugs his hand. This is all done in this cute, whimsical style to give you a sense of awe. Well, cue next scene. He didn't close the box right and the climate got screwed up. This causes Calvin to go into hibernation and basically be dead. Hugh, our resident handicapped, soon-to-be dead man, decides he wants to try waking up. So he goes in with everybody watching and begins to shock the thing, hoping to do so. Well, he succeeds, but Kevin, who has now become a literal starfish alien, didn't like being shocked awake and breaks the item, also grasping onto Dead Meat number 2's hand, preventing him from pulling his hand out. He keeps trying, but the alien doesn't let go and eventually breaks the scientist's hand. Hugh then passes out from the pain, and Calvin, who's now in rage mode and much smarter than anybody gave him credit for, uses the sharp end of the broken prod that basically was used to wake him up to escape his confinement to the thick gloves the scientist was using to interact with him. Calvin floats out and begins to explore the lab, ignoring dead meat number one's unconscious body for now, dead meat number 2, and going over to where the lab's albino rat has been caged. Why a space station need a lab rat on it? I can't even begin to comprehend. From the moment I saw it a few scenes earlier, I knew it was not going to survive this film. Anyway, Calvin climbs inside and looks the rat over, obviously curious, but not really malicious intent, which scares said rat, who bites at him in fear. Calvin is not too happy about this sudden bit of aggression, and this is the one scene in film I couldn't stand to watch. The reason for this is when cute animals die in horror films, and this is actually something that happens often and is rather pointless in my opinion. It really upsets me. I can have no feelings for the people in the film dying, but cute animals? Yeah. If you are curious though, Calvin basically grabs said rat and digests it while it's squeaking and trying to get away, loses its skin, and then you see its inside and then the rest. All the while the rest panicking and moving around, until it's nothing but bones and then nothing at all. After this gruesome scene that the rest of the crew of idiots witness, they finally decide to get Dead Meat 2 out of the lab. Roy, Dead Meat number 1, goes inside and gets him out. But as they're pulling him out, Calvin, who is finished with his rat lunch, climbs on Dead Meat 1's leg. So they close the door and can't let him out. He wants out. They jokingly ask how they're going to get him out. This is where their brains begin to melt out of their ears as they begin to make really stupid decisions. First, they tell him to get the thing off by burning it with an oxygen candle. I don't know how what the function of these things are, but yeah, they have these things. This caused the alien to release Dead Meat 1 and move away. Now, after this, instead of Dead Meat 1 floating over to the door while the alien was moved away from him, they tell him to grab a flamethrower that's conveniently in the lab and fire at it. Proceeds to do this, making retreat to the back of the lab. At this moment, I was thinking, okay, now it's far away from you. Go to the door and tell him to let you out. You can escape the lab while the alien is trapped and leave the alien trapped inside. But nope, he goes pyromaniac, chasing the alien around the lab with a flamethrower until it runs out of fuel and the alien hides. Well, now he could have gone to the door and gotten out, but he stupidly decides to look for it, even though he's got no way of defending himself from it and ensuing his own demise. So, what happens next? Said now ticked off alien comes out again and happily climbs inside Dead Meat 1's mouth, even as he tries to get out and fails miserably, and thus making me gag from the sheer thought of a living thing climbing into my mouth. From inside it, he feasts on his organs and he dies, blood gushing out of his mouth. Well, now all the idiots outside the lab are freaked out at the corpse floating around in the lab, and that's when this flamethrower that suddenly has more fuel in it, out of nowhere, floats by the sprinkler system and sets it off, thus opening a way out of the lab for Calvin, who has climbed out of Dead Meat 1's mouth and rushes toward the sprinklers. Our band of idiots begin to panic and rush to the computers to turn the system off. The onboard computer won't do it automatically, so they have to go through the thing and one by one shut them down. But predictably, Calvin gets out. It is now running loose on the ship. Cat, or Russian space person, and basically Dead Meat number 3 is basically, and this is basically all we really know about her, tries to contact Earth, and only half the message makes it because, surprise, surprise, our favorite maniacal Martian cut it off. So Cat, Dead Meat number 3, decides to spacewalk out and fix it, only to discover once she's there, Calvin has completely destroyed the entire communication system, drank all the coolant from inside the valve as well. While these little bits of info are being observed, Calvin hops out of the open coolant valve and jumps onto Dead Meat 3's spacesuit. She closes the valve so it can't get back inside the ship, and then begins to make her way back to an entrance. While this is going on, Calvin makes the cooling system inside her suit malfunction, unless her spaceship begins to fill up with liquid and she begins to drown. David wants to help her get inside, and by the time she reaches the way back in, she's nearly suffocating. He tries to get her to open the door and come into the ship, all while Calvin is still hanging on to her like a trained monkey. But she chooses not to let this happen. You can see Calvin is still a living creature, and while it seems unaffected by being in the vacuum of space currently, it will eventually run out of whatever air it's got stored inside of it and die. Dead Meat 3 decides to allow herself to die, and in doing so kill the alien as well. This seems to work as she drowns in her suit, begins to float away. Dead Meat 3 becomes the second dead body killed by Calvin, the murderous Martian. However, Calvin has other plans, and jumps off at her and onto the ship, moving around the ship in an attempt to get back inside. As they all fumble to keep it out, firing the thrusters to chase away, but then begin running out of fuel, and the ship begins to fall toward Earth. So, given the choice between allowing the alien back into the ship or reaching Earth, and it having fun on Earth, they let it inside and plan their next course of action, moving around the ship and blocking off areas, choosing to vent the blocked off areas in hopes it will be in one of them and eventually suffocate for lack of air. So after this, everybody who is left holds themselves up in one area of the ship and waits for help to come while Cam floats around somewhere until he dies. However, the current tidbit of information about Hugh comes into play here. While they're all sitting in one room, he begins going into cardiac arrest, and they have to revive him. While this bit of fun is going on, Miranda, or Final Girl, since the only other female died by now, and that gives her a title, notices movement under Hugh's pants. So they lift his pant leg, and lo and behold, Calvin's chomping away at Dead Meat to his leg. Now, as I said it was established earlier, Dead 2 was crippled and therefore has no feelings in his leg because he's paralyzed. All this time, Kenan has been attached to his leg, feeding away, and he did not feel it. How convenient. Well, after this fun realization, Kevin turns his attention to the other people, and by now he's grown a face, and this thing smiles at them. It smiles like a crazy psychopath after just killing an entire room of preschoolers. Well, the other three freak out and take off. Final Girl and David look in one direction and Sho fleeing in the other. Calvin seems to be craving some Japanese food, so it begins chasing after Sho, runs into the room where the beds are and hides in his little bed pod. Calvin, the murderous Martian, then tries to get into the pod but can't find a way in. So it floats in front of the pod, staring menacingly at Sho, who is freaking out and probably crapping his pants by now. Since Calvin couldn't get his exotic dinner, he floats away. Meanwhile, Final Girl and David are both in another room. They have returned to Dead Meat 2, and while they are talking to him, he dies, becoming the third victim of their murderous Martian friend. As this is happening, they realize something. Calvin has eaten a beacon or something, and they can track him. So they set a trap for him, and using Dead Meat 2's corpse as bait, they lower the alien to another part of the ship where they lock him in and van out all the air, thus leaving this insane extraterrestrial to die of suffocation. By now, it becomes clear that Earth has gotten a message about the hostile alien, so they send a ship up, not to rescue anyone, but to push this station out into deep space. This was a plan from all along if the other precautions had failed. Final Girl had been the one to push for such measures to begin with, so she takes all the blame for it. Considering everything, this is actually the best outcome for everything that's gone down, and actually a very illogical move, which is strange for movies like this. Or it would be, but somebody had given Sho the memo. So he finds out this ship is coming, gets out his bed pod, and then proceeds to make his way to where the ship attached itself to the station, which is also where they had trapped Calvin. so he can get off the ship because all he wants to do is get home to his family. While the other two idiots really should have contacted him sooner, and it was established that communication wasn't cut off inside the station, realize he's on his way there and rush to stop him, screaming at the top of their lungs. Well, too late. He gets there first and opens the ship, and this lets Calvin, who is not dead yet, go flying into the ship and kill the man inside. In all the chaos, the ship rips off the station, opening a gigantic hole and causing the vacuum of space to begin to suck everything out of the station, including our three remaining morons. Calvin, however, had his other plans and climbs up the shell and begins working his way to the other two. Sho decides to pull a heroic sacrifice, grabbing Calvin and throwing himself and the alien toward the vacuum. This doesn't end well for Sho, who is now dead meat 4 and dead body 4. Calvin gets his Japanese dinner as the ship rips apart, then proceeds to go after Final Girl and David, who is now Final Guy. They manage to get into the station proper, throw Calvin out of it. But by now the station is beginning to fall apart and the ship has crashed into parts of it. So the final couple make it to a safe space in the station while the rest breaks apart. And now things are worse. The ship is almost out of air and it's beginning to reach Earth. Calvin is elsewhere in the station, holding his breath and slowly dying. Well, by now the two idiots left get a really brilliant idea. Lower the alien into an escape pod and send it into deep space. However, to do so, one of them has to be inside. Dave inside said pod and pilot out of the gravity field. Final Guy, David, who doesn't like Earth anyway, chooses to do this. So while he goes and lures Calvin into the pod with oxygen candles, Final Girl Miranda makes it to pod number 2, where she intends to reach Earth and tell everyone what happened. Everything from here on seems to go on without a hitch. David and Calvin reach one pod and Miranda reaches the other. They escape the station and make their way into their intended destinations. One pod lands safely on Earth and the other is sent into space. The safe pod is found by Vietnamese fishermen and they go to help the passenger out. However, when they look into the window, it turned out the pod that landed on Earth had David and Calvin inside it, and the one that went into deep space held Miranda. Now, how did this happen? Turns out Miranda's pod got hit by space debris and was knocked off course. I do not know how she didn't notice it until she was basically out in space screaming, "No!" and corrected her course, but that is her fate while Calvin and David fought over control of the other pod which went down to Earth. The murderous alien basically then trapped David with his tentacles and pulled a face hugger on him. The fishermen, even though David is screaming at them not to open the pod, like idiots and act like idiots and proceed to do so, even though one look in the pod window basically would clue these morons in on the fact that it's a very bad idea to do so. And this ending is what made me very angry. I know and am aware that horror films, for the most part, always have downer endings. And I should have expected that, but this is not what angered me. The part that angered me was the twist of the pods being switched. This seems to be a common cliche ending for horror films these days. Not only comes off as the creators being major trolls, but is also way overdone. I, for one, am tired of these kinds of endings for horror films because not only is it predictable, but it feels like nobody has original ending ideas for once. Why does the bad guy always win? Why can't the good guys win for once? This is the same reason I was so angry with Alien Covenant. The movie ends with a character who by now you utterly hate and just want it to die, not getting their comeuppance, and you want the good guys to win in these films. This is why I enjoyed the Alien, the original ones, and Predator sci-fi films so much, because the alien does not win. It dies. Does not get to kill everyone and get away with it. Nobody wanted David from Alien Covenant to win, and nobody wanted Calvin, the murderous Martian, to win. But they both get to win, even though neither should have won, especially Calvin, the murderous Martian from life. There are just so many things that should have killed that thing off during the entire movie. First off, the alien only functioned as established early on in the film, in a climate that was similar to when dinosaurs roamed Earth. When it got exposed to the climate of the station, it went rigid. When he awakened it with a shock as soon as it got out of its containment, it should have died from the alien climate of the lab. Then there's the fact it went out into space, which not only lacks air of any kind, but it would also be paneled with radiation from space, and it would be freezing. We know that the alien was frozen on Mars because Mars is an ice-covered wasteland. That alien, which was native to Mars, should not have suddenly developed an immunity to outer space. Also, let's consider another thing about Mars and Earth. Mars is smaller than Earth and has lower gravity field. Calvin would be used to Mars' gravity. When it was on a space station, it was weightless, so it floated, and it could get away with that. But once it reached Earth itself, the Earth is a much bigger planet than Mars. Sudden gravity shift should, for all intents and purposes, hit Calvin like a literal brick wall. Earth could not have been doomed because of one of two things would have happened. The gravity of Earth would have crushed Calvin, or two, reduced it to being completely immobile due to it not being used to Earth's gravity. That thing would have weighed a ton, and we can see how it looks through the movie and the way it moves. The entire design is completely unable to function properly on the Earth's surface or any surface with gravity, including Mars. So yeah, the ending of this film really ticked me off because of how awful it was. I'm done now. Thanks for listening. Have a nice day. See you next mission. Peace.